And I've come across so many people in industry that think they live and die just by their technical craft. And the thing is, that's great, you're amazing, you're a super talented person, but if you watch any credit reel at the end of any project, not just big movies, you'll see the scale and the size of that team. And you've got to work and play nice with others, and you've got to recognize that you might be brilliant, but hey, you know what, that person over there might have a better idea or be slightly more talented than you, and you might need to concede and let the other person shine. So I do genuinely think that you should grasp the idea of honing your human skills really early on in tandem with learning whatever craft it is you want to pursue, and recognizing that the path isn't linear.
You are listening to the 21 Artist Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content to pursue their passions. I'm talking with creators, artists, and engineers about their careers, lessons they have learned, and how to make an impact. I'm your host, Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director and coach in visual effects, animation, and games. For more content, go to 21artistshow.com. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the 21 Artist Show. I have with me Simon Devereux, who is the Director of Global Talent Development at Framestore and also the founder of Access VFX.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be here. Pleasure. I'm a big fan.
One of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you is because we always want to strive here on this podcast to get a deeper understanding of how to get into the industry, of how to get into different levels, from technical directors, but also artists and visual effects, animation and games. And who better to talk to than you, who are working at Framestore exactly in that position. And also with Access VFX, you try to, build the connection between people who are coming into the industry, who are coming from other directions, studying and so on. The first question I think would be the most interesting to build up is how did you basically came into your current position? Where did you start and what do you do exactly at the moment?
That's a very, very big question, Alex, but I'll do my best to answer it. It's a very long story that I'll do my best to summarize in a podcast-friendly soundbite. So I started out, I guess historically I started out as a freelance illustrator. So all I ever wanted to do was draw pictures for a living, and arguably still do. And I moved to London in '97 after graduating with BA honours in graphic design and advertising. And I was hustling with my portfolio. And bearing in mind, this is the late 90s, okay, 1997. And I got a few connections. I made some good, meaningful relationships with some publishing houses and got some work published. So I hit that goal. But freelance illustrating, being a freelance illustrator, didn't pay very well back then. And I needed a part-time job. So I started working in HR. I started a personnel role at a well-known supermarket called Sainsbury's. Other supermarkets are available everywhere. But I did a kind of people role there. And I really enjoyed doing the inductions every Saturday and working with everybody that came through that branch in Clapham, South London. And I got the bug for people, and I tried to get back into advertising. Didn't quite work out for me. So I took a role in railway. I took a temporary role working at King's Cross Station. I was there for about 7 years, worked my way up from assistant to consultant, did everything from organising train driver medicals all the way through to supporting people with their people queries and their HR queries. And I got to a point in my career where I was made redundant. They moved my office to the north of England, and I made the call to apply for roles that were creative. I was missing that kind of creative kind of drug in many ways. So I thought, let's keep the people role going, but let's move into a more creative, exciting industry. And I was a big music head. I love art, I love cinema, and I got a role working in Capital Radio. I worked for Global Radio for 3 years. And then quickly moved from that role to Channel 4. So I worked in TV for a best part of 7 years. And then I got a call from a recruiter who was headhunting for a group head of learning and development at the Mill, the visual effects facility. I had no idea who the Mill were. I didn't really have a huge understanding of the visual effects industry. I looked at the website, thought the work was really cool. I remember they'd done an amazing commercial for IKEA. And it was all of these garden gnomes kind of putting on this kind of, it was almost a battle, taking on the people kind of coming into their garden. It was amazing. And I was at the mill for 7 years. So that's kind of how I got into the industry. And my career then went from the mill to PlayStation for 2 years. And then I joined Framestore 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. So it's that's the really short version. I hope you're proud of me there, Alex. I could have gone into significant detail there.
That's always perfect, because sometimes I love the specific kind of how can you summarize your life in this kind of interview 3-minute chunk. And I think it's also very important for a lot of people who are like listening and watching this is to some degree how you should do it in the interview. The 3 minute of my life, but obviously focused on what this, in this case, episode is about, or what this role is about. You should always have this 3-minute snap introduction prepared. I think it's always a very important thing. And yeah, I can see and hear from your description and the way that you talk that you are more in this kind of tele-development, people person, radio, podcast, just the way that you kind of engage with me. It's very obvious. So how I would divide today's episode with you is about the 3 parts that I want to do it. First one is before entering the industry. It's about, study and self-taught. We talk about that. Then the entry part, there are multiple ways how you can enter the industry, visual effects, animation, even games. And then we all talked about a little bit of what you can do extra. What can you do to improve your chances and so on. So that's the 3 parts that I want to kind of tackle with you, because I think you are the best person to talk to in this case, especially in your actual role, but also from your previous experience. Before we dive into that, do you think people who are not coming directly in visual effects, animation, and games, do they have something kind of a heads up in terms of, they're coming from something partially completely different? Do you feel they're kind of sometimes more potent because there is more of us, I tried something else and that's a pure decision that I make, compared to people who just just did the path and the first thing that they ever did was visual effects, animation, and games? Do you think there's something special about it like that? Or is that, basically the same? It's just people just redeciding what they become?
A really good question. Great question to kick off as well after my amazing elevator pitch, which I've never done before, by the way. So thank you for that. I'll be referring to this recording from here on in, I think, for that.
Just take the snippet and just send it everywhere. I was like, you want to know about me here?
I'm going to have it as my ringtone, I think. Really, really good question. Thank you, Alex. And I think before going in, I think there are 2 schools of thought. There's absolutely the path a lot of people take. So there'll be people out there, young and old, I'm talking about the whole breadth of the human condition here, who absolutely just want to work in visual effects. They will have had some kind of encounter, they'll know somebody in industry, they will be naturally creative, so they will kind of sniff out the industry. And as you know more than anyone, Alex, that it's such a rich tapestry of roles, everything from kind of CG, 2D, 3D production, immersive. It's a bit of a play set really for a creative, the industry is. Whereas a lot of people do stumble across it, and you do have these 2 kind of spheres of kind of the before, as you put it. And I don't think anyone's more interesting than the other, because everybody has what I call, and I've picked this up from a book somewhere, kind of a squiggly career path. I mean, I mentioned my career path earlier. I had no plan to end up in this industry. All I wanted to do, as I said, was draw pictures for a living, right? All I wanted to do since I was 3 years old. And let's say you choose to work in insurance, or you choose to be working in architecture, or maybe an obvious kind of artistic role that maybe has some translation to visual effects. Absolutely, that makes you really interesting. Of course it does, because there's a story there. But I do genuinely think people are on the same footing, whether they've followed that career path more kind of in a linear fashion, or whether they've bounced around from job to job and going, hey, this movie's amazing. And they'll probably go and see a big blockbuster film, or they might not. They might go see a period drama and go, how did they recreate that world? I might stay and watch the credits, or I might watch a making of, and then they discover it. And we hear stories like that all the time as well. I can name check a ton of people who went to see, whether it was Star Wars back in the day, the kind of the elder statespeople of industry now, or people now who are seeing kind of, any show on Netflix or streamers or TV and go, wait a minute, how did they make that? And they discover this whole world, and that's super fascinating too. So from an interviewer perspective, there are stories in everything, but I'm equally fascinated as to how somebody chooses that linear career path too. You know, how did they discover? I'm actually probably more interested in finding out how somebody discovered the world of 3D animation at 5 years old. What a story that would be too. And they may have stumbled across it no different to somebody in their 40s who goes, hey, wait a minute, I've been working in a bank for years. We heard stories years ago at the VFX festival where a chap put his hand up in a panel, a careers panel, and said he had to, through personal circumstances, support his family. So he had to take a job that was a pay packet. I can't remember what it was exactly. It might have been admin, banking, and nothing wrong with that profession. And he was waiting until his child was old enough to then pursue a career in visual effects. So I guess what I'm saying with my very long answer to your question is I'm always interested in the stories. I don't think there's any one kind of character. Does that make sense? There's not the linear person who discovered VFX as a baby or the person who's 40, 50 years old and go, hey, what's this shiny thing over there? I'm going to pursue that. I think there's loads of degrees in between that just make people really interesting. And that's what makes people kind of richly charactered individuals when you interview them. You get the story and then you look at the work or the potential that they have as well across all the different disciplines from production all the way through to the super technological roles on pipeline, etc.
You mentioned something that we also want to always like hammer down on every episode is like the path is never linear.
Right.
Like everyone I had on this show that never had this, even if they started in visual effects or like, that was basically their first role, even their like, career path of, becoming successful was, at least that was not linear. They had a lot of like ups and downs in there. It was not just like first job at Framestore and that's it basically. And the way there was just a visual effects study and there's no kind of in between. So it's never linear. Sometimes a little bit more linear for some people. Especially to me, a lot of people come who are either a little bit the outsiders or who are a little bit transitioning and to a different role. And so that's why I kind of always say, I think there is some kind of benefit of being a little bit the outsider. You have a little bit the broader view. You are more maybe, like a little bit more business calculative you are because you pursued something else and you literally did this extreme move to something else, maybe also a risk of, financially and whatnot, career-wise. So I think there is some benefit and also I see it in terms of resourcefulness when it comes to higher roles, because there is this management thing where you need to be looking outside of your own position, of your own work that you do day to day. And I think sometimes I feel like some people who are coming from something completely else, maybe even, they have a little bit of this view. It's a little bit over the plate view, where you're like you didn't do sculpting for your whole life. You were doing, maybe you did something else, and so I sometimes have like for me it's a little bit of this encouragement, like just because you come from a different direction, even completely nothing to do with anything of what you want to do now or do now. There is some kind of benefit. You just have to find it, and sometimes it comes in later. Maybe you don't see like, how banking helps you at this moment. And then suddenly when you become a lead, suddenly you notice that a lot of the elements that you did in banking, like the calculation of resources, are suddenly something that is kind of like, that's you need to do. You need to manage resources as a leader or supervisor or something. So it comes back. So that's something I kind of encourage you as a little bit. And yes, there is a handicap in the beginning where you are not as 10 years of doing this thing compared to someone, as you said, as a baby, basically. But I think it can pay off later when you just put the right focus in. And so I think it's this kind of reverse thing. I think some people who are focused, they sometimes can get this a lot of strength in the beginning because they have this knowledge that some outsider will not have as much. While if you do it right, I think if you're an outsider, you can build up this previous knowledge to something that really helps you in your current career, even though it's sometimes disconnected. To start with, the entry point is basically the two big questions, especially for people who want to go into that and still have time, is self-taught against study. What's your opinion on that one? And how would you decide which one should you choose? Like if someone asks you, hey, I have these two options, and also study also means a lot of money and, a lot of time kind of on hold career-wise, because you cannot actually work normally when you study. It's like, where self-taught, it's for free, let's put it in quotes. And it is basically, you can start literally tomorrow if you find something, basically.
Yeah, I don't think there's a kind of a one or the other here. It goes back to what I said earlier about the different kind of routes in the squiggly career paths. Now, on the self-taught side, and that's actually to your point around, maximizing all of those character building experiences, whatever route you go through, right? So it's almost kind of like you can forge your own path into industry by not going to university and getting a degree at one of the big recognized unis, like your Bournemouths and your Hertfordshire's, etc. So let's say you work in retail. I mean, you can go as far back as getting that first job in a supermarket. Yeah, I used to push trolleys around a supermarket in Leicester, right? Customer service skills, collaborative skills, having conversations, networking opportunities, that all starts there. So as you're kind of doing that and fine-tuning your, what people call soft skills, I like to call them human skills, you kind of fine-tune your human skills. And then it's about access to a tablet, a computer, access to YouTube, free software, as you know, right, Blender, Unreal Engine, freely available software. If you can get onto YouTube, you can carve out your own degree. I've met so many people, particularly young people, who came through the apprenticeship program. I can only really speak to when I worked at the mill, because I didn't recruit apprentices, so I don't recruit apprentices at Framestore. I know Amy and the team in recruitment do all of that, but they had similar experiences where you meet these really young people who are absolutely self-taught, and they're showing the tutors what to do on the apprenticeships because they have immersed themselves in that work. Equally, with Access VFX, we did a big event in Brixton, South London, where we met loads of people from that community in the town hall, and we met loads of young people who were designing games on their phone, and they did it for fun. They didn't apply it to career. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Yeah. You can come through a route where, as long as you've got access, and not a lot of people do, but most people do, again, depends on your upbringing and your access to technology. But there's absolutely room for self-taught artists, and not just self-taught artists. My point around character building skills, if you want to work in production, you've got to be able to influence people. You've got to be able to challenge people, have open conversations, negotiate. Some of the best producers I've worked with over the years started out working as baristas in coffee shops, and they got spotted.
It's like a model nowadays.
It really
is. Oh, you're beautiful. Let's come to our...
Yeah, right.
It's like now in visual effects, we need more bodies. You, barista.
I'll give you a boring story, which you're welcome to edit out. But when I started out back in the day, after I graduated from university in 1996, I was working, I did a year out paying off my overdraft. And I worked in a supermarket. I was on the checkouts, and I attacked that job like any other. Smile on my face, I was getting paid, so I did the job. And I was on the checkouts, and there was an old lady coming through, and she was counting out all her coupons, and all her change was falling out everywhere. And I still treated her like any other customer, smile, welcomed her, said goodbye, had a chat with her. And the lady behind her was a bar manager who worked at a really cool bar in my local town. And there was a phone call about an hour later asking for Simon, and I got offered a job working in this really cool bar. So I got to give up my retail career and go and work in a cool bar for a year before I moved to London. So, and again, great experience. I met some of my best friends and had a good time. And I wouldn't have got that job if I'd have just ignored this old lady who was kind of taking the time and holding the queue up. So I think there's so many, I say to lots of people, don't waste any opportunity, okay? If you go to an event and you discover that all of this software is available for free, or there's an opportunity to fine-tune the craft of people skills. It's underestimated. And I've come across so many people in industry that think they live and die just by their technical craft. And the thing is, that's great. You're amazing. You're a super talented person. But if you watch any credit reel at the end of any project, not just big movies, you'll see the scale and the size of that team. And you've got to work and play nice with others. And you've got to recognize that you might be brilliant, but hey, you know what? That person over there might have a better idea or be slightly more talented than you. And you might need to concede and let the other person shine. So I do genuinely think that you should grasp the idea of honing your human skills really early on in tandem with learning whatever craft it is you want to pursue, and recognizing that the path isn't linear. And your point earlier, Alex, around LinkedIn profiles. I've done so many podcasts, as you know. I do the Framestore podcast and the Access VFX podcast. And I'm always interested when I go on LinkedIn and you see that blow by blow, assistant, mid, senior, head of department. And it's got, wow, you've had a real diagonal line to success. And absolutely not. Yeah, that's what it looks like on LinkedIn. Other social platforms are available. But really the reality is it's this squiggly, crazy career path that goes everywhere. Life events, personal events, professional events, opportunities. The tapestry of those self-taught people that are honing their craft. And a lot of people are honing their craft and they don't realize that there's an industry perfect for them. Versus the people who go, hey, I want to go to Bournemouth, for example, or Ravensbourne, and I want to study VFX and come out with a great reel and equally shine and get great roles as well. So I'm not debunking higher education. I think there's some incredible talent that comes through, but there's lots of roots in, going back to your earlier question around that kind of the before times, you know, what you need to do before you get into roles. And the industry's changed so much now. You know, you don't have to enter industry with a degree anymore. You know, there's so many different entry points. As you know, there's the internships, the apprenticeship routes, even a lot of studios still operate running programs. There's so many different entry points into industry.
Let's dive into the fundamentals of this part. So when we go in terms of study at a university, private or public, in terms of Framestore, how, like your experience, how much does it really push you forward in terms of knowledge? And how much do you value university background and degree in, obviously in some kind of visual effects environment when you hire people, basically?
I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of the recruitment team here, but I don't necessarily believe that a rubber stamp from a university guarantees you entry into a particular role. I think it always boils down to the potential and the talent of that person. Mm-hmm. My personal view is that anybody can, with the right background, can go to university, right? Anybody can go, they can learn stuff, they can come out with a degree. And when people come out with a degree, there are degrees of talent. And again, pardon the pun, but you know, I did a creative degree, and I know there are people who cruised through their degree and got a third and weren't very good.
What was it in media computer science? Jack of all trades, master of none, kind of?
Totally, yeah. I've got good friends of mine who do not work in a creative role, and they did an advertising and graphic design degree, but they did it for the degree. And then there are people who came out with firsts and are flying. You know, I was somewhere in the middle. So to be fair, I didn't go straight into a creative career. I tried my hand but failed. So I don't think that a university degree is a golden ticket to a role in industry. You've still got to have the work and the potential. We're not necessarily looking for kind of polished diamonds here. You know, we're looking for potential to do well. And I do genuinely think, and it's a very on the fence answer, Alex, but it is very much a bit of both. It is about, you know, it's about the work, and you'll hear that a lot, and you'll know that from being in industry a long time as well. Is it's always about the visual, if it's an artistic role.
Yeah.
Obviously, production very different, technical pipeline also very different. But if we're talking specifically about artist positions, it's potential, bottom line, and we go from there.
The background of this is a little, because I have my own masterclasses. I'm teaching Python,
Yes.
and I'm coaching people also in that part. And I have a little bit of because I studied at 3 different universities in my life. You know, I studied law, I studied media computer science at a more technical university,
Yeah.
and I studied technical directing at the Film Academy. So I have like literally from the most traditional public university to a technical university to a private university, the like film. And I saw how different they are in their approach. And I'm still like not convinced in general from general university, public university especially. I don't think they can catch up with this situation. I actually had the situation where they take like 6 years to change the curriculum. So when the curriculum is set and they want to hire you and you say, hey, I want to do this in English, or I want to do this with this kind of topic. And if it's not written in the curriculum, they cannot offer that. Basically, because it's kind of like, you know, they have to have the safety of education, kind of, you know, a promise, basically. And then how can you react to new software, new environment, and obviously the quality of things? So for me, it's always this Same thing on one side. I believe still the work is the important part, not the degree, especially in visual effects. And I think that is also what separates this from most environments where, if you do accounting or whatever you do, basically, if you have the degree, you have a chance for the job, basically. It's like you have the degree, people will hire you because that's how they kind of judge your qualifications and your grades, basically. Yeah. While I think in visual effects, it's mostly about what's your showreel, what's your project experience, and if you have a degree from a prestigious university, obviously that puts you higher up, obviously, because it's, some name that is also behind that. But I think that is the important part. You cannot autopilot your way through this career. You cannot just go to a visual effects like university or whatever and just do the bare minimum, like, do the, I do the assignment, I do 5 hours a week, and that's basically it. I think at the end of the day, what universities can give you is structure, and they can give you, like, compared to things like YouTube, where you can start anywhere and anywhere, you don't really know. That's why I like more of a cohort-based kind of environment, kind of semesters, and not just there is some videos you can watch or there's some kind of loose connection. I think it's always important to have some kind of a package that you do, that best case a university can provide. But you also have to judge the university of, do you end up with something like of a showreel at the end of this course, of the study? Because if you don't end up with a decent enough showreel, and you can judge it by looking at the previous ones, like looking at the previous showreels and whatever, and if they don't have something to show for it, then I think it's like just a paper out you get with some kind of knowledge.
It's just a certificate.
Where comparable, I would probably always judge as like, okay, the paper is good, but do I also get the thing that actually is judged by Framestore, by DNEC, by everyone else in the industry? So it's about both too. And if you cannot find a university that has both, I would go to an online university, to an online course. And that is also my opinion. If you cannot find a university that has this grading, then do it online, do it yourself, but don't do it yourself 100%. Find an environment for yourself, like find a cohort, find a group, find a, don't be this, I watch YouTube till I get all these things. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. And also it's all about, connecting and all the million other things that is basically important here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely not kind of university bashing, but I think there's this, you mentioned kind of structure. And I think, absolutely, you get some structure at university. But I would argue you get probably more structure in like you say, more of an internship cohort or an apprenticeship, an 18-month apprenticeship, or, even those junior roles that you come in. I think sometimes in university you have structure, but you're in a bit of a bubble. I remember being at university years ago, and it was this lovely protective shell from the real world, Yes, I got to kind of play house.
And you think you're a rock star to some degree,
totally.
Like, if I get my degree, I will be hired left, right, and center.
God, I thought that. I thought I was going to leave university and I was going to be a successful freelance illustrator. But instead I was working in Sainsbury's doing inductions for checkout operators for the best part of 2 years.
For me, the first internship was the reality check. It was this kind of, when you do the internship for your bachelor degree, where you have to write and you have to do like a 3 months internship, and then you write 3 months on your bachelor, and you can combine it for 6 months.
Yeah.
And the first time I applied for a job as a media computer science, that's the reality check that I had. It's like, no one wanted to hire me, even for an internship. And then I literally replaced someone who took my place, who was like a butcher, who took that. And they said, like, sorry, we cannot hire you. We already took someone. And then like 2 weeks later, they called me, hey, we just kicked out the intern. How about you're joining now? I'm like you kick out an intern? Like, what is going on here? And it ended up being like someone who was a butcher, who said like he knows, like it was IT role, like he knows enough like programming in IT, and he didn't. So they kind of replaced it. But it was like a very strange and, kind of eye-opening experience where the bubble that you are in university sometimes kind of bursts very easily the moment it hits reality, basically.
Yeah, and you mentioned that we talked about the certificate, right? You leave with the piece of paper, and it's not that golden ticket we mentioned earlier. I mean, we've talked about cohort programs, and actually, I would say more of a kind of slight golder ticket, maybe a platinum ticket, would be something like a Framestore Launchpad. Having been through, I mean, you've been through the Launchpad internship back in the day, Alex, and you'll know that when people see that, they know that person has spent 8 weeks working on a show, they've worked on a personal project, they've been mentored by a world-class artist, they've been in industry, might have just been for 8 weeks, but it is an absolute, going back to structure. I mean, having supported the Launchpad internship with the training team, the recruitment team for the last 2 years, they are absolutely on it all the time. There's a little bit of downtime, there might be a screening here and there and everywhere, but they're working and they're grinding and they get to the end of that. And that is a calling card, whether you get taken on at Framestore or you move on somewhere else. And that goes for the apprenticeship, equally the work experience insights that we do. We've moved away from a week of working, following somebody around or sitting in dailies, to actually pulling that work experience group into a cohort, and they work on a hackathon brief for a week, and they pitch to a client at the end of the week. And I say to all the work experience kids who are coming in 15, 16 years old, you are going to be knackered by Friday. You're going to welcome Friday like anybody working in industry, because you're going to be working and you're pitching. So it goes back to kind of structure and building that craft. Everything is about building that craft, like you touched on, Alex, beyond just toughing out that 3 years at uni and getting the piece of paper with the wax stamp on there. So there's so many routes, man. I mean, that this could be a very long conversation.
Let's move on to the next level, basically. So now we basically are prepared, we studied or self-taught, however we arrived here, and now we have this entry roles basically that we can apply for. You kind of mentioned them.
Yeah.
So I see 4. Maybe there's something else somewhere hidden, but I see 4 now: runner, internship, apprentices, and junior. And they are also in that kind of like layer style. Like runner is the kind of the lowest, and junior is probably the highest, most like, you are the most deepest in that. I would like take a moment to go through all 4 and just kind of like have a quick talk, like what they are, what is the entry, like, the level maybe even, and what do they deliver. And the idea is basically to say someone who just is at that level now, the entry level is, okay, which of these 4 should they focus the most? Obviously they can do all 4 at the same time, apply for all 4, but which one would fit you best, because not everyone fits the same way basically, and not everyone has the same opportunities on all 4 roles. So let's start with runners. So what would you say are runners, and how do you like see them as who are the best people to draw into them?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I said about potential with runners. So historically, and it's an interesting one running programs, because more and more studios are dropping running programs due to the impact of the pandemic and the lack of available people in studio.
Makes sense.
So you're not able to, we go back to the before times, as we affectionately call them. A runner could come in and they would have access to a very busy studio. They'll be delivering coffees and food to high profile clients and directors and senior people within the studio. So you can network, build relationships. If you do a great job as a runner, clients get used to you. So they'll ask for you by name, and you might be able to steal half an hour with that person and get some advice, maybe get a mentor and really start to build your career. Or internally, you get buddied by a creative director or a VFX supervisor or an EP, and start to kind of build your craft to a point where you can apply for internal roles. We still have runners in industry, and those opportunities still exist. But going back to your question, Alex, it is absolutely about, somebody can come in as a runner and not know what they want to do, but just know that they love the industry. So you might have somebody who comes in based purely on personality. We mentioned earlier around, bringing in a bartender or somebody you meet in a coffee shop and go, I like your style. Have you ever thought about working in visual effects? And then they apply, the interview, they come in, and then they soak up what the industry and the studio has to offer. And we've had people go, actually, I like the sound of design, or I like the sound of production, or immersive. So then they start to work on their craft, get a mentor. Most good studios have internal mentoring programs. I can speak to Framestores. I set one up at the Mill as well. Really powerful in supporting people's career paths. And then networking internally to make your way through the studio and then through industry. So I think anybody who's interested in industry could be a runner. I know a lot of runners come via uni, have very good show reels in some cases as well. So it's not just bartenders and baristas. You might still have escapees and graduates from university taking on running positions as well, because it might be the only opportunity that's available. So that's kind of the ballpark for the runner. But it's when it's done well, running programs are excellent because nobody has access to people in a studio like runners. I don't have access to clients. I've been in industry for years. I can't just walk into a suite and go, "Hi, I'm Simon. I'm the head of training. What's going on?" Can't do that. But a runner can go in and drop off a flat white and perhaps even hang around for 5-10 minutes. Access to the chief executive, access to VFX soups, working on big shows. I mean, it's an absolute, it's a candy box of opportunity as a runner. I mean, I think when it's done well, running is the best.
It's always this asterisk of when it's done well, because that is a very important part of runner. Because runner, as it is, it can be this shift of just being, low paid.
Oh my God, yeah.
Nothing to do with whatever. That is the biggest, probably the biggest dark side of the runner part. If it's not done well, it is this just exploitation.
Yep.
And if it's done well, it is this, figuring things out basically more. Like you kind of have a low entry, but you also get the opportunity of seeing a lot and being soaking in the environment basically. And I think that is also the best way to describe it as runner is to some degree no skills needed, just the passion and the interest, and obviously the people skill. I think that is probably the most important part when you come as a runner, that you have this I can interact with people, because you want to have a pleasant runner that if you interact, they're very nice to talk to basically.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Kind of like the charisma piece and the personality, because you meet somebody who has potential and they may not have the confidence to run around the building. So it's about still seeing the potential and then providing training and support to let them thrive and let them shine, because there's still something really nice about quiet confidence or people that not every runner is a super duper extrovert, bouncing off the walls type, right? You're gonna have these lovely calm people, really introverted, old souls who come in and still do a great job as a runner without necessarily being a big personality. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and yeah, thank you for pointing out when it's done well, because it absolutely has to be paid. You know what? You're not going to set the world alight salary-wise as a runner, of course. Potentially coming in with kind of, in many cases, on personality alone in some cases, right?
Probably minus. I don't think you will, in London, you don't think you will be on zero kind of in terms of your expenses to income.
Oh my God.
But I think that is a little bit this situation. And I'm not sure if you probably don't have the numbers, but from your experience and your feeling, how much do you see runners actually transition? And I don't mean it only from the company side of you, but also from their side of you, where they actually want to transition, and obviously they get the opportunity to transition. How much do you feel is they're actually going from that to the next level, basically?
I mean, you're right. I definitely don't have the stats, but it does happen a lot. I've been lucky enough to set up Access VFX 6 years ago, so I'm connected to 70 plus visual effects studios, and I'm lucky enough to go to events and meet people all the time. So if I go back to kind of my studio work, you'll meet somebody, head of department, supervisor, head of production, head of resources, and you'll have the kind of meet and greet coffee, and they'll tell you I started as a runner. There's a lot of legacy stories in industry. And I'm not just talking to people who've been doing it for 30 years.
It's a little bit the mailroom story, isn't it? Like the American mailroom, started in the mailroom and then became the CEO, basically, kind of. It's the equivalent of visual effects.
Yeah, proper rags to riches tale. But it is so true, and it happens because they are, you know, they're not necessarily fast track, and we'll get to apprenticeships shortly. I think you still need to have the right mentors in place, and it goes back to having good development programs in place. So my stories that I can speak to are the people that came in, they were hungry, they asked questions, they said, right, I've got this role and I'm going to do it well. You know, I'll make the best flat white in town, or cappuccino, whatever your beverage of choice is, but I'm also going to go, right, who do I need to meet? Is there a mentoring program? Great, sign me up. Can I get time in a suite? Can I get time on set? Can I shadow a producer? And you've got to ask those questions, and you see those runners shine. I saw it when I started at the mill, and there were people who work as schedulers, and within a couple of years, I can speak to 3-4 people working in scheduling alone who got to go to America. One was a head of production within a couple of years. One swiftly became a senior marketing person, so it's not just creative roles. One rose through the ranks of color grading and is now killing it in Chicago, and he's settled down and raising a family over there. Like, it's amazing. I've only been industry best part of 10 years, right, in terms of visual effects industry. And seeing all these young people who started as runners, and they are now running industry. Sorry, I'm full of the puns today, but they are. It's true.
Yeah, I'm trying to say.
Piss a runner off, man. Don't piss runners off. If you're working with runners, don't be a dick, and because you'll be working for them. Because I bounce around a lot in industry now, and I'm speaking to people who are running studios, who are in senior roles, and I was chatting to them about their careers, you know, not only best part of a decade ago, which isn't a long period of time in the big scheme of things.
What was the sentence? Is like, don't be a dick to someone who has access to your food.
That's a great one. I've not used that one. I'm taking it. That's great. In terms of stats, and I know you like a stat on the 21 Artists show, Alex, is, I rarely see runners not make it. I mean, if I'm going to throw a percentage, I'd say 90% of runners end up doing something in industry, whether they go a traditional route into an artist role, or they end up going, hey, I mean, we had a runner who ended up working in the HR team as a recruiter in the end, you know. So again, building those relationships. And it goes back to what I said at the start around those curvy, squiggly career paths. So this person I'm talking about here, I mean, I won't name check people, but she came in as a runner, had a few life experiences happen, spent time with our head of recruitment, and then ended up being a recruiter. All she wanted to be was an animator when she joined. And she came in through a bit of a traditional route. She had the degree. But she thought, actually, this is cool. I like having these conversations. I really enjoy interviewing people and finding the next big talent. It's a real privilege to do. And I think there's so many support roles that often don't get a look in when it comes to the industry as well. We often talk about artist, producer, or something related to the craft of visual effects. But actually, we have people who go, we've had runners who've come in. I remember there was a finance runner at the mill. She just wanted to work in the finance team. She came in, did the coffees and the teas, opportunity came up. And again, she's killing it as a senior accountancy type working in visual effects. So I would say I'm going in with a big 90% conversion rate. It might be more, to be fair. We rarely see people go, you know what, this isn't for me.
So basically, just to summarize, like, runner is best for people who have either no experience, but maybe a goal.
Yeah.
Or have no goal, but an interest. And obviously you have to have a lot of patience. Lot of, like, you know, because it is a very, like, unclear when things happen situation. It's can be, you know, tomorrow, can be in 1-2 years, depending on how you do yourself, how the environment does. At the moment, as you said, a little bit after COVID, I think it's probably less chances because of, less people. Less people are actually around you, so less opportunities are around you. It's always this something that I mentioned, this kind of coffee break is such a vital part of everything, like vital part of problem solving. When you bump into someone while drinking coffee, you know, in the kitchen, and then suddenly, like, you notice a big issue, or you notice an opportunity, or, you know, even like if you are employed, like there's a lot of thing happen in bars and coffees, basically, and so. It's very important, and a little bit it gone away with COVID because of the remote and because of this very, I want to talk to you, so I call you situation compared to randomly bumping into people.
You're right.
I think that is definitely a big difference. Welcome to our short mid-episode coffee break. If you love the content and would like to have a successful career in the film or games industry yourself, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find helpful articles, masterclasses, and coaching opportunities that help dozens of my students to bring their profession to the next level. That's all. Check out 21artistshow.com and share the podcast with cool people you know. Let's continue with the episode. Let's transition to the next. It's the internship. Framestore has the Launchpad internship. I was in the Launchpad internship. I had a great time there. And as you mentioned before, same thing as with university, having the Framestore basically experience in my resume bumped up, obviously, my experience. Give it a little bit like in terms of internships and probably mostly in terms of Framestore. How would you see that kind of a role? What is the requirement, and how would you see the kind of position when you are being at Framestore, for example?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of more broadly about internships, there's always you need to be at a certain level for an internship. So it's less about coming in with just an aptitude and hunger.
The big eyes.
Yeah, like, wow, this is amazing. So absolutely there needs to be, whether it be through a university route or a college route or you've got a good body of work. And if anybody wants to apply for any of the Launchpad programs, there's more detail on what the entry requirements are. But ultimately what you're doing on an internship is you used the term cohort earlier, Alex. You're joining a cohort, you're joining a group of people who have a specific idea of what they want to do, where they want to work. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what you'll end up doing eventually. I mean, we did a Framestore podcast recently where we had 3 former alumni Launchpad interns on, and they came in through lots of different routes.
Oh yes, I saw that one. Yeah.
Alex was he sailed boats for a living, and we had all these kind of like really interesting. There was another chap who sold real estate in Colombia. So you had these really interesting routes in, but they had some kind of body of work. They had something to show. They've got this kind of you've got more in your arsenal, so to speak. There's still a conversation about potential and talent as always. But what's cool with the internship is you do join this cohort, and you do, the Framestore, the Launchpad internship, you all live in the same place. You get your accommodation covered, you get your travel covered. It looks brilliant. I'd love to do it. I'd love to go back in time and be part of that. It almost feels like one of these TV shows where I don't know whether anybody's old enough to remember the Monkeys, Hey, we're the Monkeys. And they all lived in the same house and had a TV show going on. I'd love to do that. And they live in each other's pockets for 8 weeks and come into the studio, as I said earlier, work on a live project. They have a buddy, they have a mentor, and a personal project that they work on 1 day a week. So it's goes back to that full-on structure we mentioned. But you're definitely coming in with a little bit more, not going to use the term experience, but definitely talent and an idea of what you want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also like the connection that I made, for example, my supervisor was Eugenie from Tutzelmann, who worked on Interstellar, for example. And she ended up being on my podcast, I think the third episode or something like that. And also she was one of the people who recommended me when I applied for Weta.
Boom.
Because if you go to these huge companies, they basically only hire you if you have recommendations from lead supervising roles. And so this came only from that experience. I think also Simon French recommended me, who was my other supervisor, but not the one who was kind of directly like mentoring me. Like Eugenie was the one who was directly like supervising me a little bit. And yeah, we worked on this multimedia ride, and I had this private project also. It was a lot, also because you came to London, kind of like orientation, Framestore. And we also did this thing where we went in through different departments. I think we also went to the 3rd floor look at how they work. So we looked at everything, how they do at Framestore specifically. And it was really, really cool. And it felt a little bit like, you are on this camp, summer camp or something like that. A lot of work, but also like a lot of opportunities. And that's also where I noticed that pubs are essential in London. It's where you get your opportunities, So even if you don't go into the runner or whatever, just go to the pubs, Brewdog or whatever.
and talk to people, and same opportunities. If people like you and maybe even you have some kind of work to show, that can be your interview already. That's something I remember we talked before, even on previous episodes. But I would say definitely, especially on Framestore, I think the internship is definitely pretty high level. So it's not something, you can do with your first crappy 3D like showreel, basically. Like it is pretty, the standards are pretty high, I would say. So I think that is also, there's definitely a little bit of a gap between runner and intern. Yes. I mean, the alternative would be like to go into a smaller studio. Like that is the other point. But just kind of like in terms of expectation, the same thing if you apply for Pixar. Like the level is not you do something. The level is you can contribute already, basically. And that's what I want to try to say. It's like what you said, like you are part of a project. So you have to be on the level that you can be part of a project. So you cannot just be, oh, I did something and you just like intern me for potential. So it is a little bit this fine line between potential and you can already contribute, kind of like to define the role a little more.
It's amazing, isn't it, that you're working on live shows from the bat. And the same with the apprenticeships. Again, the barrier to entry is lower, but you still have apprentices working on live shows. They're still like, within weeks of starting that 18-month placement. So it's that kind of trust that's given you, but you, of course, are connected to a launchpad, and I'm speaking about Framestore, a launchpad buddy or mentor, as we call it. And you have your team as well. Like everybody speaks to their mentor, but they also speak to the team because, it's the heartbeat of any visual effects studio. I mean, Framestore is great at it, of course, I would say that. But every studio, people work in visual effects because they believe in team. Again, there's not, what you don't achieve this amazing artistry without working well with others. And there's this real sense of paying it forward. That's why Access VFX works, because it's made up of thousands of people working in industry globally who just want to give back because somebody gave to them. You mentioned your own experiences, Alex. I'll have mine. Nobody kind of takes those opportunities on and goes, right, brilliant, I'm done. I'm off on my career path now. They still bring people with them. And I think that's what's so cool about working in visual effects and animation. And the Internship's a great example of that, where you can forge great networks. And we say to anybody who comes through any of our Launchpad programs is you keep in touch, you keep sharing your work, you stay on radar. Yeah, there might not be an opportunity for you at that point, but absolutely you see so many Launchpad interns come back when those opportunities arise. And that goes for a lot of our entry-level roles. I will shout out our work experience program as well, because these aren't just kids who come in and do photocopying and filing, like I used to when I did work experience when I was a kid. Like I said, you're working on actual stuff. You're playing around in Maya, you're in our training room, you're logging into a machine, you're supported by world-class artists and digital map painters and heads of CG. It's incredible. And the best people, I mean, that's another great, it almost goes hand in hand with running a little bit. The only thing with work experience, it's a week, so it's unpaid. You have your kind of expenses paid, but it really is just a week in a studio doing work on a fake brief, So I think there's lots of routes in, but it's what you do with those opportunities. Anybody can do any of these with the right application and the right recommendations, but you've got to come in and you've got to do the work and you've got to take the opportunities and you've got to follow up on all of those gauntlets that get thrown. Say yes to everything and see what sticks,
Yeah, totally. And I think it's also like the same experience with my group that after Launchpad internship, either the people were hired more or less directly. I think you have to finish your university or something like that, usually afterwards. But I think most people at some point of time, they were working at Framestore. Some people close to directly half a year later or whatever working at Framestore. So I found like the Launchpad was definitely very connected. Like it was very kind of everyone who was in the Launchpad internship who like he didn't do a disastrous job during that thing, basically get the opportunity later to work at Framestore. That's how I felt the opportunity, even much safer than Runner or something, which makes sense. It's the higher level. You already dived into apprenticeships. I have no experience on that one. So can you give a little bit of an introduction what that means, basically?
The apprenticeships were originally born out of UK government, really. I mean, I used to work in apprenticeships pre the the apprenticeship levy. So I don't know how much you know about the apprenticeship levy, but it's a lot of companies over a certain size. So I'm going to say big companies have to pay a tax. They call it the apprenticeship levy. That goes into a pot of money that you can spend on apprenticeship training. So there's no additional budget. So you've kind of already paid for it. And they say kind of use it or lose it. You have this levy pot. And I mean, when I worked at the mill, I had a pot of like hundreds of thousands of pounds to spend on apprenticeship training. And that, how it works with an apprenticeship is it's typically an 18-month program. And when you come in, you spend 1 day a week at a college. So at a college that offers that standard, whether you come in as a 2D assist or an ATD, or there's a number of different junior level standards. I believe there's a production one. I think there's a supervisory one. So there's lots of routes in via the apprenticeship route. And it depends, the numbers depend on the size of the studio. So if you're a smaller studio and you're not paying into the pot, then some of the bigger studios can kind of almost siphon off some of their levy. There's lots of different routes to get that money, so you're not paying additional budget to pay for the training. But the cool thing about apprenticeship is they call it earning while you learn. So you come in, you again get great mentors, you're assigned to a team, you have a job, you're a 2D assist, for example, and then you end up working on live shows again. But it's over a longer period of time, a more sustained period of time, because you are working towards a degree level apprenticeship. So it's kind of originally came into force years ago as the alternative to university for the young people who either didn't want to go to university or couldn't afford to go to university. And we would run assessment days as industry. We'd have these amazing Next Gen Skills Academy assessment days where you'd have somebody from Framestore and the mill and DNEG and ILM, and you'd all come together, you'd all assess together. You'd have all these amazing, really cool assessment kind of techniques and exercises. And you would be hiring based on potential in those situations, because the shortlisted people, you would have already looked at their work. But their work could be anything from a self-taught reel to a really cool Instagram account that has really nice photography. You've got this real nice balance of entry points. So when you're assessing them, you're assessing them purely on their communication skills, their human skills, which is really nice. And at the end of it, you send out the offers. And what was really fun about those early assessment days is there might be somebody in that group that DNEG like the look of, and Framestore like the look of, and maybe the mill do. So you put in your offers, and it'd be like waiting for your I don't know, GCSE results or something. What studio are they going to go with? So we used to have a bit of healthy banter with the apprenticeships, and still do. But it's a really cool program. I mean, if I had my time again, Alex, I'd be applying for apprenticeships, because you get all of the benefits of going to university. You get your degree. You have a social life, you have structure, but you're not spending tons of money on student debt. You're getting paid. And at the end of the apprenticeship, no different to the internship. If there's an opportunity to be taken on full time, absolutely. And there's loads of examples of that. Again, it's up in the 80s and 90s in terms of conversion rate from apprenticeship to role. And there's loads of people within this studio who I can vouch for, who are killing it in senior roles and have got multiple credits on big blockbuster movies. And it's wicked. It's such a good program. I love it. And proud to have been part of the early apprenticeships back in the day. We met some amazing people and continue to do so.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds even like, the deeper level, like 18 months, it gives you much, much more opportunity. And it's this kind of runner where you don't have to have particular experience as much comparably, but at the same time, we're integrated much deeper into really a path that you want to go at the end of the day. So last part, the junior.
Yeah.
What is that? When can someone see themselves as potentially applying for a junior role, compared also probably to the internship? Because that's actually I remember I have a mentee who asked me I cannot go for junior because I already I can do things. I can do explosions and whatever. And if you compare that with a lot of other industries, a junior is basically, I have no clue. Maybe I have a degree, but I have no clue how to do my work. That's the most common junior role in finances or whatever. I have knowledge, but I don't know what to do. While in visual effects, animation, and games, that's not how it works, actually. So what would you say is a junior role? What is the people that should apply for the junior role compared to basically the others?
It's definitely up there with, like you say, not knowing exactly what you want to do, but it's also dependent on the available roles, right? So whether it be a finance assistant, working in data ops, coming in as a junior, I mean, there are still opportunities to come in at kind of ATD levels and junior levels as well. I find that the junior roles are when you really have to leverage you mentioned it when we caught up prior to this podcast, Alex, use the term communicate in a meaningful way, which I wrote down, which I think is really cool, is, all of the groundwork you're doing. And we mentioned this is a nice callback to the start of this podcast, is, you're honing your craft from like that first part-time job, right, when you're at school or college, and you're starting to build that kind of tool set of communication skills. And then you start to use that once you start thinking about working in creative industry. Who should I connect with? Have conversations with, send my CV to, and have meaningful connections. So not just saying, hey, have you got any jobs going, but actually connect and go, hey, I've just created this new thing. What do you think? Or I've updated my reel or updated my CV. So connecting with the right people at the right studios that you want to work with, and just keep them on kind of, say speed dial, keep them connected to you via platforms like LinkedIn. I always feel like I'm sponsored by LinkedIn, but it is where all of the recruiters and the decision makers.
If you ask me, and if the platform I always recommend is LinkedIn. It's this, it actually came originally from job fair, where one of the NPC recruiters told me like, hey, run around, get everyone's card and connect with them on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And later I literally made it my mission to have my 500 plus basically as a kind of a achievement thing. And I don't feel it is this powerful application thing at the end of the day, but I feel it is a powerful, having your cards of numbers, basically, the old thing where you maybe are not getting constantly opportunities, but at least you don't forget opportunities and connections, and you have your I don't know what the name was exactly originally.
So the old Rolodex, yeah.
Rolodex. That is like I'm even too young for that one. But I remember it from a movie. That's where I have to. It's like the save button. Everyone was wondering what is a floppy disk, basically, kind of save button, where if you're not the floppy disk user, you like the save button, basically, and you're like, what's the meaning of that?
So LinkedIn is only as good as how you use it, if that makes sense. So anybody can create a LinkedIn profile, but if you just sit there and expect the talent or the studios to come to you, then you're sadly mistaken. You absolutely have to use it to your benefit. And it's all about, as you know more than anyone, Alex, it's all about algorithms. So let's say you have to follow all of the studios. I always say go to the Access VFX website and just click, or just Google visual effects animation studios and follow the studios that you want to work for. And then when you see a post,
follow
Framestore, like the post, comment, go, really cool work. I mean, that's it. You don't have to do anything more than that. And then the platform will get used to the algorithm. So when there's a post about a job, when there's an opportunity, when there's a networking evening, when there's a internship goes live or apprenticeships goes live, you are in the know. So make sure you follow not just people, but organizations. And then, as we said, communicate in a meaningful way, follow up, find out who the recruiters are. The advice I give a lot of people is when you see the shows, look at the credits and don't just follow up with, I'm not saying follow up with hundreds of people, but find out who the junior artists are or the DMP artists are, depending on what you want to do. And maybe connect with them and go, hey, I've just been to see Barbie and I saw you worked on it. Amazing. I really had a good time. I'd love to know what you contributed to that show. And people who work in our industry love being asked questions like that. If you send an email going, hey, you've got any job openings, it's going to get ignored because that happens all the time. But if you can find a way to stand out and actually spend a bit of time to send a really nice personal note to somebody who you've connected with, really powerful. And that's how you get remembered. And I'll go back to a recent example. I mentioned our work experience, our Launchpad Insights. We did an amazing week. It was only last month, I believe. And really great group of people, all applied off their own merits, 12 of them. They all presented beautifully. And then they all started posting on LinkedIn. So they all connected and posted. And a couple of them actually wrote really nice articles thanking myself and Amy and the team. And those people get remembered. They're definitely on my radar. And whenever they post stuff now, one of them's got a job somewhere. I like it. And I go, congratulations, because I want to follow their story. So you've got to you've got to use these platforms to your benefit. You can't just create profiles and expect the riches and the opportunities to come your way. You've got to work at it. You've got to kind of, we did an Access VFX podcast recently, and there was I think the Ardman, Celia, the Ardman talent manager, said you've got to up your game. Particularly now, you've got to find a way to get on radar rather than just applying and then keeping your fingers crossed and hoping for the best.
I was just recently on the 7 Days podcast, and it was talking about learning. And one of the things that we were talking about is how the host reached out to me years ago, and he had like a simple question about something about visual effects or something like that. And he was really like very thankful, even years later, about me like taking it seriously, answering him and directly, because like from his point of view is like, oh, I'm a nobody and I'm asking this guy who worked on this huge project.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, it was just like, like, kind of like, like a small girl, like, oh, someone is like, asking me questions. So like, and even though I'm doing that more regularly because of my coachings and mentorings and cohorts, but it's still for me, usually, especially if it's a right tone of asking, I have this weird emails that are badly translated and me help, how TD kind of, and you like ignore, because there's no hello, there is no context, there's nothing. It's just like, give me information, give me money kind of thing. But generally, I think most people who are regularly on LinkedIn, even email, they will answer if there is something to answer. Like, it's not just this,
exactly.
How do I join Framestore? That's not a question. That's a very like so generic that is basically like, you would not know, Simon, how to give advice to someone who asks you like how to join Framestore. It's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what kind of, so if someone is, hey, I would like to work for HR or at this department, and I was thinking of the Launchpad internship. Do you think I have a chance with this reel?
Yeah.
There's such much more of you like just basically saying yes or no, and then maybe giving additional advice. And that makes a big difference. And we basically moved on to the third part of how we improve our entry level. And I absolutely agree. Like, we should be sponsored by LinkedIn. Because I believe it is important. But again, it is more of a garden situation. I see LinkedIn as a garden, which is a little bit your career too. It's you plant your seeds, and it takes sometimes years, to see the growth and to see the results of that. And LinkedIn is the same. Like in the beginning, LinkedIn is literally useless. Like in the beginning, you can literally just it's basically waste of time. If you see it like that, it's literally a waste of time. The first year, probably, depending on how you do it, is probably useless, because what LinkedIn is all about is connections. If you don't have connections, you can post millions times a day. There's no point in that. And I mean that connections in terms of connected, but also connections in terms of engagement. Like you said, like you were engaging with other people, so people come back to you to engage back. So it's this both sides of connection, and that's something you need to grow over time. It's not something you just create a profile, maybe do the how to do the best profile on LinkedIn thing, and then wait for the resumes to come in, basically.
Roll in.
It is literally like, what you give in, like it's probably, you have to give out much, much more than you get back at the end of the day. I think that is the LinkedIn. But because you want something that is out of your scope to some degree, it's a way to get into the industry or to get opportunities that you normally would not get if you just apply, basically. And so that's the same. I see that too. And I think the hardest part for a lot of people is to stay consistent. LinkedIn is something like every social media, like Instagram, you have to be there every day, once a week, interact a little bit, post maybe sometimes, comment something. But if you're just like once a month, scrolling, and that's basically it. I don't think it's basic. It's basically useless at the end of the day.
You've got to open it like your email every morning. You have to. It's you have to constantly be on it.
If you really want to get the payback from it, yes.
Yeah, you've got to. Yeah, and again, it's about, like you say, meaningful engagement. It's not just selfish engagement. It's not just, right, how am I going to get a job today? It goes back. I love your garden analogy, Alex. Just like a comment. Just go on and like a few comments a day. Share some posts. There's loads of people unfortunately open for work at the moment. It's a really choppy time for the industry. So when somebody posts their work and they're open to work, I always repost it if they're if they're part of my network, because it's just don't be shy. Don't overthink. I think when it comes to these kind of social platforms, it's not Instagram or Facebook. It's a professional networking platform.
First thing, we underestimate how much other people remember. I remember a lot of people who like my stuff. Obviously, if it's too many, I will not look at everyone and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But I remember if it's like over time, because you will get the situation where someone is one of the first, and then you see the profile picture and the name maybe, and then you, after a while, and I had actually the situations where I had one person also on my newsletter and so on, and I was kind of just before to offering like a free cohort, because I know they could not afford it, but they were always engaging with me. So I was like, yeah, well, why not give him like a free hour coaching, or A, I will not lose a client because they are financially not in the situation, and B, they are engaging. So what's the damage here? It's only helping people who already engage and like my content. So for me, that was the thing. But the other part, and overthinking, and that's a little bit a question back, because I think there is also a little bit of danger nowadays in 2024, especially with LinkedIn, and that is the public persona thing. So I see a little bit people becoming very political on LinkedIn nowadays. Would you say it's a good idea to be political in general and to offer your opinions broadly? Like at the moment, for example, AI.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people just saying, oh, this is trash, this is the worst, and so on. And then I always think, what happens if you apply for a company that likes AI and maybe uses AI, and then they see your post or your comment of, yeah, this is the worst thing ever happened,
It's a good question. I mean, I think it goes back to kind of what your values are. What if there's something you want to take a stand for and it sits with your values, then I'm not going to stand in anyone's way to post something on LinkedIn necessarily. I mean, I work, as you know, I run Access VFX, so I'm posting all the time. I mean, crikey, the amount of podcasts I've done where we've been talking about issues surrounding representation and diversity. I'm putting myself out there because that sits with my value set. And if people don't like that, that's fine. And if people like that, that's fine. So it really boils down to, it goes back to the individual, like we said at the start. As long as it's not, I think for me, as long as it's not malicious or hurting anyone or has a direct kind of almost hate behind it, then I wouldn't stand in anyone's way to voice their opinion. I don't think we should silence anybody in that respect.
I mean, it's not about silence. It's about more like caution. It's more about, hey guys, people see what you write, just because like people connect. Suddenly you find yourself in an interview and people saw the negative comments about something, about maybe even their company by 2 years ago, because they were like looking at it, or something they stand for, like currently AI, or someone hates I don't know, some software or something like that, and bashes it online, and then you're like, this is our main software. I
think you've coined the term perfectly there, Alex. It's negative. If I'm writing something and it can be perceived as a negative comment, then it doesn't go out. If a comment goes out and it sits well with my values, whatever they are, and I've got my own values like everybody else in the world, then absolutely. I think because you want to stand out as well, right? You don't want to kind of be a carbon copy of everybody else walking around.
Don't do the typical post on LinkedIn that currently like the copy paste posts, everyone's like thankful letters that they basically copy paste kind of to each other. Everyone's comments is like copy paste. That's the biggest problem I have at the moment on LinkedIn, is it's a little bit too much AI, even though it is not AI at the moment. It's still too much this repetition of everyone has the same the job was canceled and they have the same comment. They have a new job, they have the same comment, and it's a little bit I think that's a little bit too much. Obviously, the safe road.
You've got to be authentic. You've got to kind of find a way to be authentic to you, and if you're going to post something, go in with high dose of curiosity. So it's a question.
Yes.
So if it's about AI, it's going, oh, this looks really interesting. How did it get made? Or, what was the thought process behind this? So, even going back to career questions, rather than kind of going, hey, here's my reel, you kind of go, hey, I hear you worked on this show. How was that? And by the way, here's a reel I've got, what do you think? So again, question, because nobody ever knows everything about everything, whether it be, political situations, current climate, or the craft you're in as well. There's always something to learn. So I think authenticity, agreeing what you stand for and position yourself in that way, and only you know how to do that. But if it's negative, don't go there, because you can sniff those out a mile away.
How I would like to end this episode is to talk about Access VFX, because I think it is one of the platforms that currently exist to give you this entry, to connect you with the industry, to connect you with people in there. So first thing, can you quickly summarize a little bit like in the beginning, summarize what it actually is and how someone who wants to get into the industry, basically from all these entry levels that we talk about, how they can kind of like take the benefits out of this, besides subscribing on LinkedIn and so on, and watching your podcasts, but also like what they can like actively like do and reach out on the platform.
Okay, so very top line, I won't give you the history of Access VFX. It's all on the website. If anybody wants to go onto the website, some cool blogs about how it all came to be. So Access VFX is an industry movement made up of 75 mostly visual effects animation studios, industry bodies, and some universities and educational establishments. So it's a coalition striving towards a shared goal, which is to create more inclusion, more diversity, more equity across the industry. So really looking to even the playing field and speaking to everything we spoke about earlier about different routes in. So not just the university route, the apprenticeship route, and it's not just careers as well, right? It's all manner of walks of life in visual effects. And we're built around kind of three key pillars, really, is recruitment, education, inspiration, it's actually four, and mentoring.
So totally like, oh, I have to update my website now.
I know, it's four pillars, or bubbles, or buckets, or whatever you want to call them. And I guess the inspiration piece is interesting, because everything we've spoken about now, a lot of our podcasts, our mentoring program, the events that we go to, the blogs that we write, all of the social activity, is all built to inspire, but not just stopping at inspiration. So you begin with inspiration. You might come to an event and hear a great panel discussion. You may have a great conversation with somebody at an event. You may get connected to your mentor. And that inspiration has to lead to genuine, meaningful aspiration. So this is very buzzwordy. So it goes inspiration to aspiration, and then ultimately it's got to lead to application. So it's got to end in some kind of route into industry. So that's kind of the top line of what Access VFX does. There's the inspiration piece, and the mentoring program is what I always call our jewel in the crown. So it's made up of almost 3,000 industry mentors worldwide. So we were born in 2017 in the UK, and then we quickly opened chapters all across the UK. Then we went to Canada, then all over the USA, now Australia, New Zealand, 11 European countries, and I did say Canada already, didn't I? So essentially we're everywhere, and we're growing all the time. And the platform that we have is a great space for people of all ages from 13 plus, so technically not all ages, 13 plus, can get themselves an industry mentor from anywhere in the world. And actually that's a great place to start for all of those routes in we spoke about earlier. If you apply, it's free. It's accessvfx.org/mentors. You can sign up as a mentor or a mentee, and it's all on an e-mentoring platform, a bit like a Slack type platform where you can mentor upwards of 5, 6, 7 mentees, because it's on an online platform. So you're not meeting for a coffee in Soho. You are online. Somebody will share their work, they'll ask a question, and you can reply when you're free. So you can be perhaps somebody based in, I don't know, Montreal. You've signed up, and your mentor could come from Los Angeles, can come from Melbourne, could come from the UK. And it's a great way to start building those relationships and build those networks from an early age. So 13 plus, if any parents are watching this, if you've got young people in your family who have creative leanings or are interested in the industry, they'd be mad not to sign up to this fully safeguarded program that we're really proud to have built. And I should shout out Foundry, who sponsor it every year. So Foundry and Netflix gave us the money to launch in Europe as well. So we've had some really generous kind of benefactors who have helped us get these programs off the ground. But yeah, big up Foundry, because they sponsor us every year to allow a third party company, Prospella, to run the program. So yeah, it's an amazing scheme. And it started from nothing back in 2017. Little UK in Camden. We had about 40 school kids involved. And now it's a global platform. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's sometimes like the saddest part of the modern kind of time, where so much content is out there that sometimes, like, the diamonds in the rough are a little bit lost in the middle, even though, there's like the great opportunities. It's sometimes like hard to be found. Like, even if you offer things for free or you offer high quality things nowadays, it's so much noise on the internet. It's basically impossible. So that's also one of the things that is important to me too, is, find a voice. Even though my podcast also is not the biggest one, but to give voice and understanding to certain maybe things, like, I remember we did the motion capture thing, which I found nowadays becomes a little bit more and more, but it was 3-4 years ago where it was still a little even more kind of smaller and kind of obscure of what exactly performance capture and so on is. And same thing here. I think that's fantastic. And I think the idea of having this community, and the same thing a little bit, you use the element where people are happy to help.
Oh my God, yeah.
Especially like in this industry, because we all remember how hard it was to get into all of that, not only because the level is so high, but also the way into that is there's no clear path often, slowly changes, but it's still, obscure with like misunderstanding and, and so having people mentor you. And one of the things that's why I also do that is just because, yeah, it's often not problem of resources. It's often problem of where to go, like what's the next step. The same thing that we kind of try to debunk a little bit is like, what are the different roles that you can even enter an industry? Because a lot of people maybe never heard of Runner or didn't know that there's apprenticeship. I certainly didn't know that there was apprenticeship at Framestore actually before I started talking to you, because I know that Launchpad, I know Runner, and I know Junior, but I didn't know there was a fourth opportunity actually, basically. Thank you very much, Simon. Anything you would like to add to kind of create a bow to the whole conversation?
I would finish with the word community. I mean, you've touched on it, Alex. Is it, visual effects and animation and games to a point is a community, and you can be part of it really easily, whatever level you're at, whether you're, like I said, a career changer or you're 13 plus, sign up for a mentor, and you can ask all the questions we've spoken about. You can build on that. You can get yourself an industry mentor and continue that conversation. Get networking. You don't have to go to a networking event to network. You can connect with people meaningfully. And I'm going to go back to what we said earlier. Find ways to communicate, build relationships with industry in a meaningful way. And people are always willing to give you their time. It's a misconception. Ask the questions and be part of our amazing community that is constantly giving back. So that would be what I'd end on, Alex.
And I think still you should go to events.
Big time.
Join groups online. I think that one of the last things that Facebook is even existing for is groups. There's still things you can connect with. And I think that is a very important part of like also the entry level. Don't try to enter solo. It's not a solo game. Even the whole entry, you can, but it's like in every game. If you try to do a multiplayer game solo, it is much harder. It's just this is a little bit like that. And I think this game is definitely like, there's so many, like I know from, and that is also one of the benefits of doing something like university or cohorts or whatever, is the connections that you build, that you can, push each other in later. Yeah, someone is now at Framestore, they can like, give a word, give you tips, recommend you. Don't see it only as, oh, it depends on my skills or my education or something. A big factor is the groups that you're part of, the events that you go, the opportunities that you take, the extra, the LinkedIn that you grow, and all of that pieces will be the one that kind of give you, like, one of them will be a plant at the end of the day. But you never know which one it is, and just like relying on skills is probably the kind of most kind of roulette part that you can do. Skills are super important, but they're not always will give you the jobs. You can be the most talented person in the world.
Yeah.
If you don't have the kind of connections, the right, or the right kind of position in some groups or whatever, then they're kind of meaningless, because people have to see your work, see your potential, and that is the part that I see as important also.
One thing I always say to everybody that comes through is you're always one conversation away from changing your life, and you genuinely are. It's not a corny phrase. That conversation could be the one that just sets you off on that trajectory rather than perhaps that one. And I would lean into that. And remember, this is a people business. These shows, projects, all this amazing content you see happens as a result of collaboration with human beings. And you've got to get good. You've got to learn your craft. As you say, it's not just about the technical ability. It's absolutely about those human skills and getting good at the human skills,
Amen to that, basically.
Cool.
Thank you, Simon, for joining us. It was such a pleasure having you. And also thank you to your assistants, babe, by the way.
Josh, shout out Josh,
for the whole recording work. And that means thank you very much, guys. That's everything we want to talk about. Definitely check out Access VFX. I think there's a lot of resources that you can get, and I hope that it still grows. You find even more people from both sides, from mentoring and mentees.
Thank you.
Because both are important for that scale, and we can kind of build a more, frictionless kind of way from, I want this and I understand how to get there, like in a lot of other industries nowadays. And I think the other part is also to have an industry that is more stable. And we are in 2024. I think that is the second part of that, not only getting in, but staying in is the probably part two would
there
be
is a part two, for sure.
of how to stay in that industry and have a successful life, career, whatever. I think that is the other part, but that's out of the scope of this one. Maybe next time. Thank you, Simon. It was a pleasure. Thanks, as man. Always. And see you next time. That's it with this week's episode of the 21 Artist Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. This podcast is 100% ad-free, and to keep it that way, check out my website 21artistshow.com. There you can find exclusive access to awesome masterclasses and coaching opportunities to work successfully in visual effects, animation, and games. Just go to 21artistshow.com. And don't forget to share it with people who would benefit from that content and tell them they're awesome. See you on the next episode.